Good to have our guest in the studio who's been here before, but great to have him here again. Patrick Silili Adolwa is here this morning. Good morning, Patrick.
Good morning, Duo.
How are you doing?
I think I'm well.
You think?
Yes. I mean, you're never too sure about things until, but at the moment, I'm well.
In this present moment, you are good.
Yes, I am.
Fantastic. We'll go with that.
That's why I'm here.
Patrick is a consulting town planner and urban specialist, and he's been here before. And today we're going to be looking at the role of boroughs in a county system. And so folks are asking, boroughs, okay, what on earth? We've said them before. We've said it many times. I believe it's one of the ticket items that the governor for Nairobi County campaigned upon. But I'm going to look into that into a little bit more detail today. But let's welcome you with today's proverb with CT. You know where he goes every week. He'll tell you where he's gone this week with today's proverb.
Yes. This particular country, in the year 1889 to 1907, had a capital city that is different from the one it currently has. That's a really broad hint. It may not be useful. However,
give any hint. Grass used to grow in the
city.
Yes, but in the year 1999, it had a census. It has censuses every 10 years.
10 years.
But 1999 is significant because the results were never officially announced. In this particular country. Which country is this?
I have no idea.
It's in East Africa.
Uganda.
Okay. It has the first woman on this continent of Africa to ever win the Nobel Peace Prize.
Yes. Oh, is that Kenya?
Ding dong.
Okay. So this guy was about to go to Ethiopia. Said, sorry.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you gave me a better hint.
Yes, it is Kenya.
Yes.
Okay.
Our proverbs. Fanikio huzaa fanikio. Success breeds success. Yes.
What do you think about that, Patrick? How would you interpret that?
I think it's a very positive way of looking at things, that when things are done very well, when things are set up in a good manner, there are always chances that everybody has a win-win situation. And I think it's a truism, because, I mean, if you want things to work well, I think you set them up in such a manner that they sustain themselves.
Well, there you go. Okay. It's great words that you've used. Set up things in a manner that sustain themselves.
Yeah.
And now we're talking about county system and its infrastructure and the role of boroughs in a county system. Let's start off with some definitions, because when we talk about boroughs, it sounds very hoity-toity. And what are those in the first place? And then before we even start their role, let's establish what are those in the first place and why they are important, if they are.
This is a subject I like, and at the same time I don't like, because from the very onset I have a lot of discomfort with the use of the term borough, particularly in our context, because it is a very alien word. Actually, it is far-fetched, and if you scan the whole continent, you will barely come across the use of the term borough. And looking at literature last night, just to be clear what this borough business is, I was taken to Britain and Germany and all sorts of places where the root borough comes from, which just means a town or township or something like that in Germanic languages, in Old English. And that is why they have places like Edinburgh and things like that. It has to do with a town, an administrative unit, and so on and so forth. So it has a meaning in British culture, in English culture, in French culture, and so on and so forth. But it's a bit of a long stretch to bring it into a country like Kenya, where we don't have those kind of things. And again, this term has gone to other jurisdictions because the British have gone to Australia, or they've gone to Canada, or they've gone to the US. And so the other place where the term bara is used very prominently is New York. So you don't get to hear the term bara used in so many jurisdictions. And I know that prominently used in New York and in many other US systems, but not anywhere else do you find it used prominently. And I cannot say that here in Kenya, it's a term that is in our legal statutes. It's not.
No.
Okay, so to me it's far-fetched. But in Britain, it's commonplace because that's what they use to define urban systems, administrative systems within counties.
So why would we use it here if it doesn't relate? Why would we even
I still agonize because last time we were here, we were talking about decentralization, and we were saying that given our context, we would have naturally gravitated into municipalities in the case of Nairobi, which again we can illustrate using Dar es Salaam, because Dar es Salaam has had municipalities in it for a long time, starting with 3 initially, which was Ilala, Temeke, and Kinondoni, and now adding 2 others called Ubungo, So I think there is a sense in which we should have gravitated into a space which is already provided for by our own legislation. But somebody found the term bara a very fancy term to, promote a political agenda, I suppose. And therefore, that's how it is introduced into our space. But seriously, it has no basis in our law. In our culture.
What do we have in our law and in our culture that would meet the same need?
Yes. The Urban Areas and Cities Act provides for, the administration of towns and cities and municipalities in a county setup. So if we have a county setup as provided for in the Constitution, a 2-tier system of government, then because we don't have a 3rd tier of government, the Constitution provided for the Urban Areas and Cities Act, which therefore becomes the municipal level, the level at which then you can provide for administration of cities and towns and municipalities. And Nairobi is a county in its own right, so it can provide for lower level administration in terms of urban or in terms of municipalities. In fact, Nairobi County can provide for itself cities within itself, because the city of Nairobi sub-counties actually have a higher population threshold than is required for the establishment of cities. Okay. Like there are areas in Nairobi City, sub-counties in Nairobi City, which are bigger than municipalities like Eldoret, like Nakuru, in terms of population. And those cities have reached the threshold for population thresholds that entitle them to be called cities, and therefore they've been granted the charter or status of cities. But Nairobi sub-counties by far have met those requirements. And yet we speak about boroughs, which to me is such a nondescript term, because what is it? What is a borough? Even when you look at what they provide for here in terms of the duties and responsibilities and functions of a borough, it doesn't seem like it is coherent. It's not coherent, because we are grappling with the concept of a borough here. And for me, I just see it as an extension of the administrative services from the center. And it is not really decentralization per se.
Okay.
So are we saying that, first of all, just to clear any muck-up, we are saying that let's look at Nairobi as an example. And the reason why you would decentralize things, or the reason why you would have smaller administrative areas, is because the thing as a pie is too big to administer over, that you cannot deliver services to the whole place in the manner in which you ought to, because of its size.
Absolutely.
So the reason why you want to go into this borough discussion, or smaller pieces, is so that you can deliver service, administer properly to populations without having lack right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So there is a need for that. There is a need for it.
You could not say it better than that.
Okay.
The need has been here all along. And we've been saying that the mere decentralization to the sub-counties is provided for in the urban areas, in the County Government Act, but we are talking about cities with very complex urban systems, development programs, and so on and concentration of population. So you want to look at Nairobi and Mombasa, those two city counties, differently because they're not rural counties. Okay? So if you are dealing with large swaths of land in rural counties like Marsabit, like Moyale, like Turkana, then you have territory, rural territory, so you can talk about sub-counties. And the word county does have a meaning. I mean, it connotes a regional, rural setup. But when you talk about sub-counties in Nairobi, to me it's a misnomer. Because
what should we call them?
What should we call them?
We need to have an urban definition for these sub-counties. Yes, you can call them sub-counties because they're part of what is prescribed as a county and its systems in the County Government Act. But because they are uniquely urban systems, you don't want to see them as county. The word county means rural. Yes, that's what it means.
You know, there are those who've argued along the same lines that you are making a presentation and said that Nairobi, given what it is, perhaps requires a unique dispensation, something that isn't quite the same as what we refer to as other counties within the country.
Absolutely, and this is what I'm alluding to.
Yes.
And I think we're not short of examples. And if I give you the example, Dar es Salaam started looking at decentralization a long time ago. In fact, 20 years ago, I had the privilege of visiting Dar es Salaam. And we were taken to the three municipalities then, Kinondoni, Ilala, and Temeke. And they already had this notion about decentralizing and giving services at local levels. So it's not new. I think, as far as I'm concerned, Kenya has been such a laggard in this, regard. And so sometimes I look at us and I'm like, guys have done things and here we are, trailing them. So yes, we do need the sub-counties in Nairobi to be fashioned in a certain way that delivers services to citizens, that helps citizens to have a say in the day-to-day, administration, not just administration, but development activities, social activities,
Let's look at the sub-counties of Nairobi.
Yes.
Because sometimes when we have these conversations and we talk about these things, it seems like something that you've picked out of a textbook and you need to have the thick bottle glasses to really understand what's happening. But if we bring this conversation down to the actual thing that we are talking about, there are 17 sub-counties of Nairobi,
correct,
right?
Yes.
Westlands, Dagoretti North, Dagoretti South, Langata, Kibra, Roysambu, Kasarani, Ruaraka, Embakasi South, Embakasi North, Embakasi Central, Embakasi East, Embakasi West, Makadara, Kamkunji, Starehe, and Mathare. Of these 17 sub-counties, essentially what we're saying is that these all make up Nairobi.
Correct.
And some of them are huge. Take Embakasi just on its own. You've had to separate it into the 4 geographical areas of Northwest, East, and Central, right? It's big. You've had to do that on its own. But essentially what we are talking about here, okay, take the borough thing and chuck it out the window. Call it something else, right? Yeah. We're saying that there is a need for these 17 sub-counties to have their own administrative platforms, because nobody can be running back to City Hall every day when there's a problem.
Correct.
That Embakasi Central should not have to run back to Arthur Johnson Sakaja's office down here to say this and this needs to be done. Right? But currently, that's how it is. It is too big. There are too many people knocking on 5 million. And they are not, number one, receiving the services that they should, even when we want to talk about things like water. We want to talk about things like electricity. We want to talk about things like garbage collection. You can't have an eye on everything to be done in the way it ought to be when you're running all of these millions of people from City Hall. The question is, to whom is the responsibility of capacity building to ensure that these 17 sub-counties can be run from an administrative point for each of them?
I like the way you define the problem. And everybody understands what the problem is.
Everybody.
I think everybody in Nairobi struggles to get things done because of how complex the place is and all the things that you allude to. But where is the will? For me, the question is, where is the will? I mean, you know, politics and leadership are two distinct things. What we need here is leadership. And we're not short of ideas on how best to run complex systems like Kenya. And there are policies. And the reason, part of the reason for devolution was to meet something that we call subsidiarity. Subsidiarity is a concept which allows for services to be delivered at the most appropriate level. Okay? And so all these principles go into the whole concept of devolution. And first of all, we started with deconstructing the country so that we do not have to come to Nairobi for everything. That was one of the reasons for devolution, and to make sure that there's equitable distribution of national resources. But having reached the county, again, then the principle of subsidiarity should set in, okay, automatically, where then the best level at which to deliver last mile services really must be defined, even within a county such as Nairobi, okay? And so Nairobi persists and insists on using a sub-county system which is appropriate for rural counties, you know, big rural counties. The two city counties, Mombasa and Nairobi, require a system of suburban systems. They require to decentralize their big urban system into urban subsystems. And I'm putting my accent on the word urban. Okay? That is why the word bara comes into play. But in our circumstances, we have already defined the way in which any county can establish services in its sub-counties, and where there's concentration of urban, you know, units by, you know, doing municipalities or cities or towns and so on and so forth. So that structure is already defined in law. In Nairobi, if you go to Embakasi, Utawala, it's in a different place. It is like 12, 15 miles, kilometers out of Nairobi city center. Embakasi, Utawala, is actually bigger than Kisumu. I am telling you, Utawala, if you look at the urban structure at Utawala, it is bigger than Kisumu. In terms of the urban space, the urban fabric there, it is much more complex than Kisumu.
And even if you look at the population.
And even in population. So what do you want to do with it? You want to treat it as a sub-county, or do you want to give it a proper, solid municipal system so that it can run the services as the governor deals with higher level policies and issues and you know, coordination with national government? Why should the governor be involved in the day-to-day last leg
of garbage collection
and permitting of development control?
Because
and I hear you talk in terms of lack of will or political goodwill in ensuring that we set up these administrative units to enable the citizens get better services.
Yes.
So in terms of what we need to do for that to happen, how do we take this conversation to the man at the top to make sure that it happens? Because as we have this conversation, it is necessary, because the residents of this city demand and deserve better services. But that has to come with good political will.
How do we when somebody comes to office, they come to office on the basis of a manifesto and an agenda. I do not know that sometimes people understand and appreciate the complexity in which they are coming or bringing themselves into. And I think that it is time we spoke to the need to decentralize the city in real terms rather than to do token decentralization.
There, Patrick, I thought you were going to say we need to examine and we need to question the ability of those who seek these offices as to whether they actually understand what it is that they want to get themselves
I think
into.
I stopped short of saying that, but that's exactly what I said.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question from a planning perspective? I believe that data and information ought to form the basis for decisions.
Yes.
Or one would assume that that's what's happening in a logical setting.
Yes.
That before you make a decision about something, you've looked at the what you've been informed by and say, okay, based on 1, 2, 3, then we can do B, right?
Yes.
So from a planning perspective for a city, one would assume that if you have in 1975 5,000 people moving about the city, that you would imagine that these 5,000 people at some point would procreate, and that there would be more people, and that your populations would grow. There's some scientific data that can even be applied to that. You say human beings by nature will do 1, 2, 3, and we can project and say in the next 20 years these 5,000 people will become 5 million, as we've seen in Nairobi. So when you're planning the infrastructure of a city and you're saying that we're going to move housing out here, we're going to move water distribution out here, do you take into consideration the burden that would then be formed on the infrastructure and what would be required for you to deliver services to these people, say 20 years down the line? Does that happen in planning?
Sometimes I wonder whether we ever have enough time to respond to all these questions that we ask, because there are many questions and they are actually very scary questions. Because yes, when I look at my notes, Nairobi's population is 5.4 million people, so they say. Sometimes our statistics. But it's by far the largest county in Kenya, isn't it?
Yeah. By
Right?
population.
Well, I mean, that's the point.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about people, and we're talking about. I'm coming back to you.
It's population.
You're the one who asked the
resources.
question.
Yes.
It's the population. It's the statistics. Okay. So if you have 5.4 million people, that's a country in Europe.
Yes.
Many countries.
That's a country in. That's a
Even in Africa.
Many countries.
It's bigger than Botswana, 2 times bigger than Botswana.
Yes.
So you have to manage Botswana's population in Nairobi, right?
Yes.
Okay. So you asked me in planning. Yes, but I was the center of the Nairobi plan, the new plan. Which I mean is. Nobody's using it, but we said
you were in charge of planning.
I was responsible for it.
Yes,
I started the process. I left the city. I came back as a national government official responsible for that docket.
Yes.
And we at that point were planning for a decentralized capital city, and we were saying we cannot have a city that is a radial city, which means that everything leads to the center with concepts like central business district. Those are misnomers. We need to have multiple business districts all over the city, so that we don't have traffic moving into one direction. So the idea of new plan was to unpack the city into manageable units with different economic and development nodes, and that is exactly what we should be thinking about from a planner's perspective.
We're having a conversation today with Patrick Adolwa, and we're looking at, so manageable units for counties and why see why we've removed boroughs now from this conversation. Okay, so it's necessary to have more manageable units, and that's why the idea came up in the first place, to kind of, decentralize things so that you have smaller units for administration and service delivery and things like that. So Patrick, you've been telling us, so we've broken it down a little bit.
Yes.
There's a new plan.
Yes.
People were hired.
Yes.
Consultants were put in place. They said by this year, we should be able to do 1, 2, 3. It would be remiss of me to say absolutely nothing has been done, but I'm going to take a guess and say that in terms of the new plan and its implementation, we've seen very little of it implemented. Or are we saying that over time and by this date it would have been finished? But if you have, like we say, a huge administrative area of Nairobi, and I believe that the things that have come into the new plan are this decentralization into manageable units. It is also one of the big ticket items that the current governor ran on in terms of his bid to run Nairobi. And he talked about boroughs. He did, over and over and over and over again, realizing the need to have these manageable units, because then it would ensure service delivery, of course, for a smaller size. Why have we not seen the implementation beyond talk of this thing?
Okay, you'll be disappointed to learn that it took many years to complete the new plan, because we started doing the new plan way back in 2001.
Okay.
Because the older plan, the previous plan, the 1973 strategy had expired, and therefore there was a development vacuum. And that's when I got appointed to the position of Director of City Planning, and so it naturally was my first assignment. I mean, when you are appointed the Director of City Planning, you do what you must do. And so I found myself, at a very interesting point where I had to do a plan to replace the 1973 strategy. So it was an exciting moment. But plans are not taken seriously. Urban plans are not taken very seriously in this country, and I regret to say so, because there was absolutely no interest in completing that new plan until much later in 2012. So you can imagine a plan taking almost 10 years to complete, because there was no will, there was no leadership. And I'm using my words today much more softly than before, because I think we need to just say that leadership was lacking as far as the development of Nairobi is concerned. And remember, the 1973 strategy was supported by the World Bank. And this particular strategy for new plan was also supported by JICA. We ourselves having been reluctant to put in our own local resources. And therefore you can see where the lethargy stems from, that we haven't been very keen on putting our local resources into urban plans. And so we find ourselves in this very uncanny space, because we are impatient with financing urban development plans, and therefore we are impatient with long-term development horizons. We are comfortable with short-term.
I think you're being so polite, but okay.
Yes, I am.
Yeah.
He's being polite, he's speaking like a professional from a planning perspective. You see, all these activities, everything that we're talking about here, okay? At the end of the day, the centrality of it is money.
Yes.
Money. My mind goes back to what Nairobi was and how it became. Most people think that Nairobi was the capital of this country from the beginning. It was Mombasa. 1888 to 1907. British East African, the protectorate. Remember, the colonizers began with commerce. It was commercial interests that brought them.
Yes, it was the British East African Company.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
The administration came later. Now, if you look at Nairobi, look at businesses and what they have done. They've created what we're talking about. Take a huge supermarket chain. Look at what they do. They understand where the population is.
Yes.
They start their business there. They decentralize.
There's a logic.
It's clear as day. And if you look around Nairobi, the units that we are speaking of that administratively we don't have actually exist. You can live in Parklands and never leave Parklands to go anywhere else. You can live in Utawala and never leave Utawala to go anywhere else. Because literally right now in this country, what you need, you'll find there.
Yes.
You can live, choose, take your pick, whatever it is you want. And I'm saying that if we already have a situation where these units exist, and you can even divide them, and you can even determine how it is, what is it that prevents the administrative part of the system that we have here from just doing what they need to do?
Let me tell you. Here are the populations. Dagoretti sub-county, 294,000, which is 300,000. That's bigger than Riru. Okay, isn't it? I don't know what the population of Nakuru is, city.
We can find out.
Okay.
Go ahead.
There is Embakasi, 663. There is Kamukunji, 220. There is Kasarani, 525. There is all those. There is Njiru, 283. And there is Westlands, 247. If these places were in a rural county, they would all be cities.
So Nakuru has a population of 571,000.
Nakuru City.
Nakuru City, yes.
Okay, fine. But
Or did you want the whole county?
No, I'm just giving you an example of how many cities we actually have in Nairobi. And we are not treating them as cities. We are pussyfooting around them and saying, no, look, we'll just give you some administrative treatment. We will not allow you to be complete sustaining entities. We will not allow you to have semi-autonomy.
Why? I'm sorry, and that's the crux of the matter, in my opinion.
Let's go back.
Why would it be a comfortable position for me to say, look, rather than make you fully administrative to ensure that there's proper service delivery, to ensure that there's proper governable administration, why would I back off of that as opposed to just giving you to say, go ahead and do this to me? Why would I now say, no, well, let me just give you a small, let me just give you a small administrative office and you can, dilly-dally over there. Why would I do that?
But even as you ask the question, no, okay, let Patrick answer the question. Let me not water down that question. Okay. It's an important one.
I think it's not a question of planning anymore. It's a question of our political culture. The conventional political culture, contemporary political culture we have, where there is more power at play rather than leadership, than management, than
even service provision.
Service provision.
Yes.
Because when you establish a city, whether it's a city council or a metropolitan or a corporation, your accent is on services. Honestly, the only way anybody evaluates you is your capacity, ability, and efficiency in service delivery. Nothing else, no other parameter matters. Okay? So, do we really see ourselves as being strong? Do we pursue a very strong agenda for services and infrastructure and so on and so forth? Clearly not. And I think that is where we need to shift our paradigm so that we begin to see ourselves as an institution which is enabling, providing services, allowing for decentralization of systems in such a manner that if you live in Embakasi, you never have to come to City Hall for anything. I mean, as we speak, we ought to be having 10 mini city halls all over the place with very serious, service delivery capacities and capabilities and competencies.
Why I brought in the subject of money is this.
Yes.
When you have the confusion that Nairobi County is, it's deliberate.
Yes.
It's because if you're talking about just the technical administrative know-how that we have, people who know what to do and how to do it, believe me, there is no shortage. But that politically, the political will is what takes precedence over everything else that we're discussing. At the end of the day, it's what we will see playing out.
Absolutely. What do you want to do with a repository of skills that you have and competences that you have? I mean, Nairobi is a hub like no other in East and Central Africa. There isn't a person that you'll be looking for in Nairobi that you couldn't find, even in terms of urban specialists. But the question begging is, what does leadership want to do with it?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, today, even the conversation that we were having here the other day in terms of just I'll take this to the national government, delinking treasury from the presidency. I mean, if you compare that with what is happening with the leadership in the county, it's pretty much the same thing. There's money involved. I want this basket to be mine and control it the way I want.
You've introduced something interesting. Why don't we then look at even the discussion we've had regarding the independence of the three arms of government?
Yes.
Where you find individuals, someone cedes power, they cede power, then they blame the person who they have given power to for taking the power which they have ceded. There is no place on the planet, this particular planet called Earth, where the executive is never trying to control the other arms of government. Yes. They all do.
Yes.
All executives do. And that is the reason why people have constitutions that are robust. And that's why, yes, It is to ensure that you put a halt to that forward movement. Every leader on this planet who is a politician wants to do exactly what people blame the president of this country for doing. Now, the people who are targeted, whether it is the judiciary, whether it is parliament, my friend, the constitution has given them an independence which those who have determined to cede have ceded. So it is not the person who has sought to take your power. No, it is you. You gave it. The citizenry, the constitution have given it to you. We have donated it to you. And then you, without our consent, you've gone and donated it elsewhere. We blame you, not that person.
Okay. So, we know that there is a need.
Yes.
We can see the evidence of that need spilling over every single day.
Yes.
There's a plan in place, has been developed over time.
Yes.
And hopefully it's to be actualized by a certain time.
Actually, it has
exceeded the time for
it has
24
expired.
years.
It has
It has been overtaken by time, let me say, because we spent so much time in the planning than in the doing.
But right now, what we are saying essentially is that in order for us to see some of these things actualized, that it's going to have an injection of will, human will. So it's not about it's not like a Lego thing that you put together with the building blocks, because if it was, one would assume it would have been done by now. It has to be an individual or a group of individuals who will come together and say, okay guys, put the money behind this thing, get it done, do it now. So we are essentially saying that we are depending on the will of a group of people to actually get this thing done. Otherwise, it will never happen. Is that what we're saying?
Absolutely. I think we need people of goodwill all round. We need to begin a debate. Sometimes we have debates in which we shout and fight and what, but I think we just need the candid debate in which we say, if we do not take care of things, the proverb that you began with, if you do not take care of things, then things will fall apart. And it's very easy for Nairobi to fall apart because you have not taken care of things. And I think it's a case where you have to be ahead of things that can happen. And I don't understand. I keep on saying I would be very frightened to be the CEO of Nairobi without a battery of the best brains to help me to figure out things before they overwhelm me.
But you're a politician, clearly.
I am not.
No, you're not. Because
I'm not.
Politicians don't think like that.
Yeah.
Politicians, by and large, tend to be magic thinkers. They think something and they believe just by thinking it is so.
Well, I mean, that's the reason I am not a politician.
Yes, exactly. And that is why when you find political leadership in full throttle and without checks and balances. I mean...
yeah, but how did we get ourselves here? Why did we put so much faith?
We allowed ourselves to get there.
Yes. How did we put so much faith in that? Because sometimes when I'm seated by myself, I ask, why did we put so much faith in a certain group of persons? You have given them a label, but yet we're the majority. Can't we find a way of prevailing upon them from time to time, or restraining them?
The variety we have in this country, you don't keep them in check from time to time. It's a constant. As they think they know, this one is going to be. Otherwise, they fly off the handle at the slightest gap.
Opportunity.
They fly off the handle.
Yeah, but coming back to what you're saying, yes, we do need to make those plans as often as we should, even if they are not used, because then we shall have played our part. Okay? It would be remiss of us not to do anything about it and try to play politics. I mean, there are times that the argument is we all should go into politics if we want things to happen, but that clearly is not possible.
Actually, it can work. It can work. You see, when you talk politics in this country, you think you need to present yourself to participate in elective politics as a participant who is seeking a position. No. To be active in politics doesn't mean that. Holding leaders to account, political leaders, that is being involved in politics. And ensuring you participate in public participation, that is being involved in politics. And because when you do that, and you do so actively, and you do it well, then you get good leadership, because those you have elected understand that there'll be consequences for not doing what they're supposed to do.
And I think just to ride on what City is saying as well, is because when the leadership was getting to power, there is a specific manifesto and plans that they had. Therefore, it behooves upon us as the residents of the city to check them every day as a constant, as City says, to make sure that that promise, the plan that you put you there, is actually implemented. Because if you don't do that, then who will?
In fact, the question, what I would raise is the county of Nairobi should not be run by MCAs.
Well, there are people who have floated that proposition before. I know that at one point some people have asked me for an opinion on that, and when I volunteered my thought that perhaps we should have left Nairobi out of the system of counties and just run it as a national administrative capital city, people did not seem to buy that either. But perhaps Nairobi should have been run that way. But again, the question begs then, how then would the people in Nairobi be represented? Because then people in Nairobi would find themselves disenfranchised.
Yes and no. If you see, we are assuming that the current structure is what would hold. If we had municipalities and cities within, then the representation you speak of would make sense, because you would have representation within those cities, within those units, who would do exactly what it is that we are saying they ought to do. Because currently, you are talking about individuals who are supposed to help run this mammoth of a unit with its complexities. Okay? They are woefully inadequate. Woefully inadequate.
Speaking about which, you see, the tragedy that faces us with devolution is that we actually lost our municipal systems. We lost our municipal culture, because even in other counties outside of Nairobi, the municipal culture has disappeared, and for the same reasons. You'd be surprised. For the same reasons that Nairobi is unwilling to decentralize in a much more meaningful way, the other counties are unwilling to allow autonomy of municipalities and cities within their counties. Again, the issue is, it's about hegemony, okay? And people have, and you say perhaps with reservations from me, that the only thing that politicians think about is hegemony. I think there are instances of leadership amongst some politicians.
There are
instances of leadership.
Where, for instance, Patrick? Instances of leadership.
Well, where a leader does have, the will to allow systems to function to such an extent that places are not completely grounded.
Example?
No, I'm not talking about this country. Surely, there are many benchmarks. Are you saying that we have reached a point where we cannot find a leader in this country? Is it true that we can't find leaders in this country?
We have leaders.
We do, don't we?
We do.
Yes.
We do.
So that's what we're looking for.
Yeah.
We're looking to find people, leaders, even those who are not in office perhaps, who can influence some things. And they can influence sustainable urban systems. There are people of goodwill who can say, yes, we understand that as a politician you do have your own needs and aspirations and so on. But the thing is, if you do not have sustainable systems, then you do not have anything.
But let me go back to what I mentioned earlier on about the issue of money. When these units are devolved in the manner that we're discussing, say we're talking about Nairobi City as our example. Something which will then come in is something called efficiency.
Yes.
Infinitely more than what we have now. The moment you have efficiency, even when it comes to matters of revenue, believe me, you will suddenly be shocked at just how much more can be realized.
But that's the reason why we're saying decentralized systems have a way of bringing in much more efficiency. If you're looking for revenues, for whatever purpose,
whatever it is you want to do.
Whatever it is you want to do.
Whether it's a school system,
you have
whether
much
it's the
more
health
efficiency,
system.
you have more revenues, you have more things happening for you, you have more development happening. You see, let me give you an example. If you are looking to apply for a development permit in Nairobi, it can take you a whole year for that to turn around. If you have these things localized, it can take you a couple of months.
Even weeks.
Everything. So if you are looking to find 100 million shillings in revenue from that particular activity, then you'll find it in a shorter time. So all we're saying is, you can lock up this behemoth or you can open it up.
Yes, and even the development you speak of will be relevant because you're talking about the decision making is relevant to the people who are within that particular unit.
You can imagine how much more revenues could be unlocked for the city of Nairobi if you had a much more efficient system for,
And Adolwa, in all this conversation, what would be the role of the citizenry in making sure this plan is achieved?
Let me tell you, citizens are busy doing things. If you go to the neighborhood, if you go to the place where I live, we are performing municipal functions. We have our neighborhood association. We're dealing with garbage. We're dealing with security. We're dealing with all manner of things. We are restraining rogue entertainers and businesses from overrunning us with noise pollution and so on and so forth. We're refusing our streets to be littered by and all sorts of unplanned development. So the reason why we are robustly doing these things is because there is a gap.
Well, I mean, the case for this cannot be argued. Obviously, it's clear that these things need to happen. And the hope is that there will be some kind of will expressed. Our time runs out when we talk about things like this, unfortunately. And the continued conversation, like we say, needs to happen. I want to say thank you very much, Patrick Adolwa, for joining us this hour. And hopefully we can continue talking in these.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.